So you're going through a divorce in New York. You're probably staring at a mountain of paperwork, right? Well, today, we're going to demystify all that legal jargon and turn it into a clear roadmap for your future. Look, if you're in the middle of a separation or divorce, you already know the legal documents can be, well, confusing, stressful, and let's be honest, kind of intimidating. But here's the thing, they're not just paperwork. Think of them more like a powerful legal roadmap, a map that you and your spouse actually get to draw yourselves to navigate your separate futures. So let's dive right in. Okay, so what are these agreements, really? At their core, they're basically written records that sort out all the big stuff, child custody, support, and how you're going to divide up your property. And what's the main goal? Well, it's to avoid a super costly and drawn-out trial. And, that's a really crucial point to remember. The vast majority of divorces don't end in some big courtroom battle you see on TV. Nope, they end with an agreement. And that's exactly why understanding these documents and getting them right is so incredibly important. All right, so two terms you're going to hear thrown around a lot are separation agreement and stipulation of settlement. Now, they pretty much do the same thing, but there's one key difference, and it all comes down to timing. Okay, so here's the breakdown. A separation agreement, that's what you use before you've officially filed for divorce, maybe while you're living apart but still legally married. A stipulation of settlement, on the other hand, comes into play during an active divorce case. It gets baked right into the final judgment. Now we're getting to what might be the single most critical choice you'll make when you're drafting your agreement, and that is deciding whether it merges with the divorce judgment or survives it. And trust me, this isn't just some boring legal jargon. This decision has huge, long-term consequences for your future. So, what happens when an agreement merges? Well, think of it like this. It gets completely absorbed into the divorce decree. It basically transforms. It stops being a private contract just between you two and becomes a public court order, just like any other ruling a judge would make. But if it survives, it's a whole different ballgame. It keeps its status as a private contract. Yeah, the divorce judgment will mention it, but the agreement itself stands on its own 2 feet, totally separate from the court's decree. Okay, and this is why that choice matters so much. If you want to modify a merged agreement, which is now a court order, remember, it's relatively easier. A court can change it if there's what's called a substantial change in circumstances. But trying to modify a surviving agreement, that's a private contract, and it is much harder. So this one decision right here directly impacts how flexible your future is going to be. Life happens, right? Things are unpredictable, and sometimes your agreement needs to change along with it. So let's take a look at when and how these documents can actually be altered after everyone's signed on the dotted line. So generally speaking, if you want a court to modify an agreement, you have to prove there's been a substantial change in circumstances. What does that mean? Well, it could be something major, like a significant job loss, or maybe one person suddenly gets a huge increase in income. Or it could be a new medical or educational need for a child. Oh, and for child support specifically, New York law also says you can ask for a review after 3 years have passed. And see, this is where that big choice you made earlier comes roaring back. A court can modify a merged agreement based on those changing circumstances we just talked about, but to change a surviving contract, whoa, that takes a much higher standard. We're talking exceptional circumstances. It's really designed to be set in stone. Okay, so what happens if an agreement isn't just something you want to tweak? What if it's just fundamentally broken? Well, in some very rare cases, a court can actually set one aside completely. Just tear it up. First things first, you gotta know that New York courts really favor these settlement agreements. They see them as valid contracts, and they are super reluctant to undo them, especially if both of you had your own lawyers looking things over. But they can be challenged and thrown out if something really serious went down. We're talking about things like fraud, one person hiding assets, or flat out lying about what they're worth, or duress, which is when someone was basically coerced or forced into signing it. Yeah, check this out. In one actual New York case, a husband made exactly this kind of argument. He claimed that his wife had picked out and even paid for his lawyer, and then, get this, made huge changes to the agreement after he had already signed it. And you know what? The court found those claims were serious enough to let him proceed with a challenge based on fraud and duress. And I love this quote because it perfectly explains what unconscionable really means. It's not just a bad deal, It's a bargain that is so incredibly lopsided, so grossly unfair, that it actually shocks the conscience of the court. It's an agreement that, like it says here, no person in his or her right mind would make. So, after all of that, what's the big takeaway here? Well, it's that these documents are so much more than just formalities you have to slog through to finalize a divorce. They are really powerful legal tools. They actually allow you and your spouse to determine your own futures, to come up with solutions that fit your unique family, and to stay in control, instead of leaving these incredibly personal decisions in the hands of a judge. The key at the end of the day is to build them carefully, with full financial disclosure and a really clear understanding of the long-term effects of your choices. The ultimate goal is to create a roadmap that is fair, that's enforceable, and that is absolutely right for your specific journey. One that balances the certainty you need today with the flexibility you just might need tomorrow.